So the 3-day situation that was touted by the competing unions, the NUM and AMCU, as a sit-in and a hostage drama respectively, has now ended seemingly, but the labour issues remain a huge concern. To discuss, we're joined by David van Wyk, who is a mining analyst and lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation, looking at the rights of workers and were they respected here. Mr. van Wyk, thank you very much. Firstly, the mine is there, and we had heard this previously. They say the conditions were dire, but they have indicated, at least some of them have indicated, that they were there voluntarily. This was a protest. However, the NUM and others maintain that some miners were held against their will. Now, if that is correct, firstly, that's a huge problem, right?
Well, I think it is a problem that some people were there against their will. However, this was an action of last resort. The mine workers indicated, and the union indicated, that they've been asking the mine management for a recognition agreement since January. The agreement was not forthcoming, that they've taken the matter to court, and the courts have been dragging their feet. And finally, they lost patience and they decided to have this underground sit-in. I really think that employers should know from their payrolls and so on, because the union dues are deducted from their payrolls, what the preferences of mine workers are. And they should also allow for the space for mine workers to make a choice of union and not try and force them through closed shop agreements into a single union. Because if that union no longer represents their interest, then clearly they cannot continue with that union. It's like you are driving a particular car and you're no longer happy with it. You sell it and you get a new car. You know, it is a very competitive environment, especially with the shrinking mining industry around gold, with lots of mines closing and workers being retrenched. There are fewer and fewer workers belonging to the trade unions, and so the competition between them is going to intensify. But they have to agree to have this competition done in an orderly manner. And the management of mines must also agree that they should actually be aware of what is going on and take cognizance of the wishes of workers so that this kind of situation does not develop. Obviously, they've lost a lot of production time, more than a week, as a result of this particular action, and it could have been avoided.
I was going to ask you exactly that, because AMCU also said that the NUM has not been conducting balloting. It doesn't want to do anything to show up that it's lost the majority support. So you're saying in this situation it would have been very easy for the employer to come in and to understand what was going on, and the onus was on the employer, Gold One.
Yes, I think that the onus is on the employer, but I think that the employer was trying to play a divide and rule strategy, you know, and to put the workers against one another instead of having them focused on their working conditions, their wages and salaries, which are appalling at that mine. And these workers really have real grievances. You know, if you want to run a mining operation in South Africa, you have to be aware of the challenges and grievances that workers face in the workplace. It's very dangerous work. It's very tedious and exhausting work. And if you don't pay attention to your labor relations issues, you're going to get conflict. And this is exactly what happened.
And the closed agreement that you talk about, so we do know that there was some sort of agreement in place, or there still is, between Gold One and the NUM. Why is that allowed? Well, if it does undermine the rights of workers, if another union then becomes the majority?
Well, I think closed shop agreements are a thing of the past. They should not be allowed. Because it basically holds workers hostage to a particular union, whether it serves their interests or not. You know, so for that exact reason, it should be open, because I'm sure that closed shop agreement does not involve Solidarity or NUMSA, who also have members at that particular mine. You know, so why is it that you take the workers, the blue-collar workers, the guys who are the lowest of the low underground, and kind of trap them in a union that is not effective? If they feel that they want to belong to another union, why not allow them? You know, it is no skin off your back to say to them, okay, guys, let's have a ballot on this mine. Let's see who you actually support. Or let's call the unions in, let them dish out their forms, let them fill in the pay deduction forms for the unions, and we will see who is the majority union. The South African labour relations on the mines have not really transformed since apartheid, and this is a real problem. We can't continue with this super exploitative cheap labour system that we have on our mines and expect our mines to be effective. They complain about productivity, but if workers are working for 6,000 rands a month, doing incredibly dangerous work, whereas other workers are getting in excess of 12,500 rands a month, what are you saying?
I'm really interested in what you're saying, because the mines often do talk about productivity. We know that it's pretty low in South Africa. And they also talk about labor relations and labor disputes. So it looks like two mining unions are at odds, and that loses millions for the mine owner. But you're saying the owners themselves have a huge responsibility, and they're just not living up to their obligations at all.
Well, I don't think that they are. I think there are two things here that we need to consider. These mine workers, in most instances, if you go on Google Earth, you'll find the squatter camp where the living out allowance workers are living outside of the mine. They live in very terrible conditions with no electricity, often smoke-filled, very often no proper diets and things like that. The second thing is that we compare the wages between South African mine workers and Australian workers. Australian mine worker gets easily more than R1 million per annum, whereas South African mine workers struggle to clear 100,000 rands per annum. They do exactly the same work. They can't tell me that the Australian mine worker is more skilled, because it's not true. You actually need to be more skilled to work in South African mines. They are far more complex and dangerous than the open cast mines and so on that they have in Australia. A truck driver in Australia driving the exact same truck, the same Volvo truck as the South African worker, also almost earns R1 million per annum, but not here. Then people will talk about the cost of living over there. And that also is nonsense. We are paying global prices in our shops for what we eat and what we consume. And I can tell you, I don't see how any human being can survive on 6,000 rands a month and then maintain a family.
All right, there's also been criticism of government. As far as I'm aware, no officials were on the ground. Should they have been? You can also talk about the police. I mean, if there was a hint of anyone being held underground against their will, how could they have dealt with that situation as it occurred initially?
Well, I think that, this is for me a big problem, because the question is it possible that management wanted to push the situation into a Marikana type situation, which would be very damaging for the country, very damaging for its relations with China, because this mine is owned by Chinese companies, although it's operated by South African management, and very damaging for BRICS. So I'm glad that the police did not become involved. I am somehow glad that the government allowed the situation to go through and force the mine management to actually now engage with the unions, because that's what they now are doing, which they should have done in January already.
Mr. Van Wyk, we've run out of time. Can I just challenge you quickly? Why would the mine want to create a Marikana-like situation? It lost millions of rand reportedly per day, and this was financially crippling, and some miners are still reportedly recovering.
Well, I think that they were demonizing the one union as opposed to the union that they favor. They were trying to create the impression that AMCU is a criminal union. And that is because AMCU is more demanding in terms of wage conditions, wages, and living conditions of workers and so on. Unfortunately, NUM, having been one of the strongest unions in this country, has become a sweetheart union in the industry. And that is partly because they've got shares in these companies.
All right, thank you. We'll see if we can get a response from the company to some of the things that you've said. We appreciate your analysis, as always, from the Benchmarks Foundation, David Van Wyk.